Hi, welcome to Local Matters. I'm your host, Ken Moore, and I am delighted today to have with me as my guest Larry Wood, the Executive Director of the Airspace Museum. I like to be around Larry because I never stop learning. He keeps talking and I keep learning, and it's really fun, and I've learned so much in the last few minutes just chatting with you that I have a lot to, I want the audience to know, so let's get started. First of all, one thing I just learned is you are a native of McMinnville.
Yeah, I was born here a long time ago, where Walgreens is, the old hospital. During the war, my mother was staying with my grandmother and grandfather out on their farm, which is outside Carlton.
And you went to school here and then went off to?
I went to Portland. My father came back from the war and we moved to Portland.
Okay.
He was a hotel guy. And I went to school in Portland then at Benson High School and graduated from there. Then went to UW.
But you haven't spent your life nearby by a long shot. You spent a number of years in Vietnam.
I spent a number of years in the Marine Corps, yeah, and 1 year in Vietnam.
1 year in Vietnam. And you flew hundreds of combat missions.
Yeah, I flew A4 Skyhawks for a year and 295 combat missions.
Tell us a little bit, just a brief. I know you love the A4. Tell us what's up with the A4.
Well, the A4 is the joke always was it was a Tinker toy, it was a Bantam bomber, it was Heineman's hot rod, this and everything else. So it's a very tiny little airplane. It was built with one specification: 27 feet 6 inches is the wingspan. That way it would fit on the elevator on the old aircraft carriers without having to fold the wings. And so it was built lightweight, very simple, very easy to maintain. There was no computer. It's the last analog airplane is what everybody calls it. And so we flew close air support or deep interdiction or whatever they wanted us to do. The airplane, by the time I got to it, you could just about do anything you wanted with it.
Wow. Well, Larry, I know there's a whole hours to talk about that.
Oh yeah.
But let's move on to when you came back from the war. You went into flight school.
I went back to teach at the replacement squadron. This is where guys come out of pilot training and then they learn how to fly an airplane, a particular type, then actually do something with the airplane, not just fly it.
So you spent a lot of your time in the service as an instructor.
Yeah, 3 times as a flight instructor, and then also I taught at the Naval War College. So I was a professor, Professor Colonel Wood. That's cool.
And so you served your country for 30.
The DD-214, that's your discharge paper, says
Yes.
30 years, 11 months, and 15 days.
Thank you. It's amazing to have you here after all that.
It was fun. That's why I kept at it.
So you got out of the service and you wanted to continue teaching?
Yes.
You went to get your teaching degree?
Yes, back here. I told my wife after 30 years she could pick where we were going to go, and she wanted to come back to Oregon, so we did. So I went back to Western to get my teaching credentials, and student taught in Kaiser at Whitaker Middle School, and I got hired by Whitaker. So I taught at Whitaker and then moved on to Claggett Creek in Kaiser when it opened, the new school.
So about 8, 9 years.
8 years,
of teaching middle school. You like middle school kids because?
The light bulb still comes on. When you talk to a middle school kid and you do something really cool, they look at you and they go, ooh, that's cool. High school kids are a little too cool to do that.
Now, you made a transition 10 years ago.
1997 is when I retired. So.
Okay. Now, from school, then you moved. How did you get to the Airspace Museum?
Well, when I quit teaching, my wife said, "I married you forever, but not for lunch. Go find something to do." So I went to the museum as a volunteer on Fridays, and that's when most of the Marines are working at the museum.
Yeah.
So I started there, and then 2 years later, I got asked to teach a bunch of kids about an airplane by a friend of Mr. Smith's, and then Mr. Smith decided I needed to be the education director.
Okay. And the school there is ESA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, ESA is a program that started just about the same, a little bit before I got there. And it's the Engineering and Aerospace Sciences Academy. So it's the engineering pipeline for Mac High. The museum provides the space, the rooms, some of the equipment, and the school provides the desks and chairs, and the school provides the teachers, which are really special people in my opinion. It's one of those rare opportunities where teachers have time to collaborate and actually work on what they're going to teach and make it all fit together, which is what every teacher dreams of.
And one of the aspects there is they have a program that's on McMinnville Cable TV.
It's a little different program than Issei. It's called SOAR, and that's SOAR Productions is what they call it. And it's been at the museum, I think this is the 3rd year. And we have a TV studio that we put together with a little help from Coin TV and a little help from Sony and a lot of help from the school district to kind of get the right teacher there and everything else. And so the kids meet out there every other day for half a day, and they actually produce a program called Live from the Blackbird that appears on CCTV here in town. It must be these guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is incredible. We've just touched on the surface of some of the programs that are out there.
Oh, yes.
I want to pause for a minute and talk about the situation around the museum. It's a concern. We can't really change what's happened in the past, and there's a lot to talk about there, but let's just skip over that. Talk about the 10,000-foot view of what's going on right now.
Okay, a couple things have been finished. The Department of Justice has done. That's settled. Department of Justice referred to the IRS about the taxes. It's called UBIT, unrelated business taxes. And they referred us to the IRS. The IRS came out and did an audit on us this last summer.
An audit?
An audit.
Were you a little nervous?
No,
there was nothing to hide.
It's the IRS.
Okay.
Okay, and the gentleman came in and he did a very, very thorough job, walked me around, I showed him what we thought, and he came up and said at least 50% of the admission prices, well 49% of the admission money that comes into the water park should be tax-free. There are a series of, and there's a whole bunch of them, tax cases with the county property taxes, and that's boiled down to where we went to the magistrate. She gave us most of what we asked for. We appealed to the tax court. The tax court came out last December, a year later, and he had agreed with us on most points. There are some things that the judge said we needed to go back and negotiate with the county over. There's some little pieces here and there, and those need to get done. There were a couple things that he disallowed, and a lot of those things have been disallowed. We knew they were going to be disallowed because we were going to pay those taxes anyway. But now with the bankruptcy of Evergreen, some of those things will go away. For instance, half of the theater was Evergreen offices. Well, there is no Evergreen anymore, so we've moved into that space. So that should make it part of the nonprofit, and that'll happen, I think.
So going forward with the property taxes on the water park, what's the situation there?
Okay, the property taxes on the water park should be adjudicated this summer. There's a court date coming up, I believe it's in August, and we'll go in and make our case. We think the IRS findings will be kind of helpful in that, in that they said at least half of what we did in revenue, the most of revenue is admissions, would be admissible. And we think we can improve on that and want to demonstrate that with the county. And of course, if it's in state tax court, the state comes and represents the county in that particular case.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Very
it sounds like it's going well.
I think we're doing all right. I think we're doing very well.
There's a big concern about airplanes that are not owned by the museum. There's liens on them. They might be going away. What's going on with that situation?
Well, there are actually two things involved besides the museum. One is Evergreen Vintage Aircraft, which was a for-profit company set up by Mr. Smith, and that owns about 25 airplanes. Some of those have liens against them from the bank, and there are a couple of angels out there that want to buy those liens.
Okay.
And of course, if they buy those liens, then the airplanes would belong to them, and they can either leave them in the museum or sell them. The two that we know of, their plan is to leave them in the museum, although they want to make a couple of them flyable. They would fly them in the summer and then bring them back to the museum in the off-season. And air shows. And I think that's probably pretty close to what's going to happen.
Okay.
Remember, those airplanes didn't belong to the museum, so they're not our airplanes. They were Mr. Smith's airplanes in Vintage. There are a couple of others that belong to a private nonprofit that Mr. Smith established called the Michael King Smith Foundation, named after Mike, his son. And those airplanes are part of another set of liens, but those are very small liens, and there's enough money in the foundation that will get paid off. There are things happening there.
Well, this all sounds it's going in a positive direction. I guess the overall question is, people want to know, is the future of the museum solid?
Yes.
Okay.
We've traditionally paid the rent, and the electric bill, which is quite large, and and the salaries and stuff like that with admissions. But if we want to grow, we got to get some outside help. And what we need people to do is, like all museums, we need people to come buy a ticket, buy a membership. We have a plan that we're going to initiate here shortly to reduce the cost of the memberships to McMinnville residents, make it more approachable by them. And what that allows them to do is if they had out-of-town guests, as members, they don't have to pay admission to get in the museum. And they can bring their guests. And that's a whole lot cheaper than having to pay for you and your guests. That gets expensive in a heartbeat. We know that. And there are membership days in the water park where we dramatically reduce the price of admission to the water park for our members. So it should be a good deal for, I think, for everybody. And
Wonderful.
It's affordable. It's about what it would cost you to make one trip to the museum, would buy a membership.
I think people would love to see a shot. Mike, our director, could you bring up the shot of the, there we go. Tell us about that. You can.
Oh, that's the goose. Obviously, one of the tricks in the museum is things in the museum have wheels. We move them around. So if you were to go into this building, which is the Space Museum, you can see the Titan there in the hole in the ground. There's nothing in there right now except the space side, and all the airplanes are outside because this is SIP weekend. So the Wine and Food Festival runs from Friday at noon through Sunday at 5. And we hope to see everybody come out. That's fun. That's a great event.
We've just got a few more. I've got about a minute left. Sure. Just tell us about some of the exciting things that are there. This is your chance to tell the community why should they be out there.
There's a lot of exciting things out there. Besides SIP, that's pretty exciting to me. But we have some really cool airplanes. We just got a new one that is an O2, which is an airplane used in Vietnam. I actually flew with these same guys. They were called Nailfax, and we got that airplane, and it was one of the actual airplanes used in the rescue of Bat 21. Bat 21 is a movie that starred Danny Glover and that guy. Anyway, it's a terrific story, and this airplane was actually involved in that rescue. And so it's a little Cessna Skybuster, so push me, pull me. And we were very proud of that. We should have that done, I hope, by this summer. It's in restoration. We got to put it together. We also have an F-86, which we never had before, which is a very famous Korean War era fighter. And that's sitting over there shiny. We need to paint it and get it all put back together again. Our restoration facility is about to get started again. We finally worked out leases and places to put them and get them back to work again. So that's what I think is the most exciting.
All right. And I'm going to talk about the water park. I went down what's the big green one? I won't want to give it away, but there's a surprise in that water slide that you won't forget.
There's a lot of things in that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that is a good one. The fastest one is the body slide, the Mach 1, and that's 61 feet, 227 feet in 22 to 24 seconds. So
Larry,
you really go.
We're out of time.
I know.
It's been great to have you. Thank you so
very
much for
Ken.
being
I
here.
appreciate it. Great.
Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Ken Moore, Local Matters.